Good morning and welcome to another Seize the Day. Today is the last day in August. Can you believe it? Kids have started back to school here and went out yesterday to drive into work because I did the Seize the Day for my office yesterday and caught all the school buses, that you just forget, like, how you got to time your trip around here so you don't get behind one of these school buses that's picking up a kid every other house. So yeah, so that was an awakening. Can't believe that tomorrow is going to be September 1st. Trust you guys are waking up feeling refreshed, ready to begin a new day. Last night I had an opportunity to attend a new work that is being held down in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It's called Recovery Church, and basically it's a it's an offshoot of like an AA meeting in that it combines all of the disciplines of an AA meeting, the accountability, the walking through steps, but then they also have you know also made room for following a meeting, people then engaging in some real Bible study and worship because they found that there were many Christians, right, people who were seeking more than just what the AA was offering in regards to a higher power. They had come to know Jesus and they want to really lean into that and invite people to an environment where Jesus is front and center. So this we have a couple of members now at Bethany who are starting this, and they wanted to begin downtown in Portsmouth, and so yesterday was their first meeting. They had about I'd say a good 125 people. It seemed like that were present, and it was a it was great to be a part of that. Also, to see so many from Bethany Church who were attending and who also are participating in helping to move this forward. I think it speaks well of everyone and the intentions, but it also just reminded me, right, that we live in such a broken world. Um, um, we may not have problems with substance abuse, right? But all of us belong to Sinners Anonymous, right? We're all a part of this group that could stand to use the redemptive work of Jesus. That we would learn something more of His truth and see how that truth would set us free. And so I was grateful to be a part of that yesterday, and praying for some of these leaders that God would just give them wisdom and discernment as they move forward. So really, just glad to be a part of that. Um, we are doing our lesson now, right, in Matthew 28:16 through 20. Um, the theme there of making disciples, that Jesus has called us out to engage the people around us, to challenge them to come to a place of faith in this revelation that God has revealed about Himself and about the kingdom of heaven, and then teach them to obey the things that Jesus taught us. So it's going out into the world and trying to make this difference gives us a sense not only passion for this work, but also a sense of purpose and recognizing that we're to go out and represent Him to the entirety of this world. And that's why yesterday, standing there, in this recovery church meeting and recognizing that Jesus is an answer, Jesus provides hope and direction and redemption. Like, all are welcomed at the foot of the cross of Jesus. And so I was grateful to be a part of that yesterday. So this whole Matthew 28 now is pushing us into what does it really mean to make these disciples. So we looked at Paul in 1 Corinthians 9, where he says, I've become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. And now we're in this passage in Acts chapter 10. And in Acts chapter 10, this passage is all about an illustration of how Peter now is engaging Cornelius, who is a Roman centurion, has a responsibility for 100 soldiers in the town of Caesarea, and Caesarea was a town dedicated to the Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar Augustus, and um, and and the and it was really constructed by Herod the Great. Herod the Great was the Herod that pursued Jesus as an infant to kill him, sending the troops down to Bethlehem to kill all the children 2 years of age and under, because he was so insecure about his own title that he couldn't stand to think that there was this king of the Jews that was born within his kingdom. Herod was quite the character, quite deranged, actually. But so here we're finding their interactions. And as I said, this is all about going beyond our presuppositions, right? So I'd like to pick up the story again, and I'll just quickly. Cornelius was one who was devout, generous, had the reputation of the Jews as one who really loved God, but he really didn't know about Jesus, the Messiah, the kingdom of heaven, right? And so it says that in a dream that God gave Cornelius this vision, and in the vision he says, I want you to go and find Peter. And he told him where he was staying, and what does that have to say then about all of our ways being open before this God that we live and move and have our very being? I mean, it's not like he says, listen, this is where he's staying. This is the house. This is the guy who owns the house. This is his name. And I want you to send people down there and bring Peter back. And meanwhile, Cornelius has to respond to that, right? Like, how often do we pray for God to give us, insight, and then when he does, we don't even act on it? Yeah, that's not what this is about, right? Cornelius is demonstrating an allegiance to God here, that having been given this vision, he acts on it, which is also saying that Cornelius wasn't just resting on the fact that he was a good person, that he was doing the right things, because there's always room to grow, right? That's what this whole discipleship thing is about. That it's never that we just arrive that, oh, I know who Jesus is and that's enough. No, it says here, not only are we challenged to believe, but then the Great Commission is saying that we need to be taught to obey all the things that Jesus taught us. So this idea of constantly growing in not only the knowledge of Jesus, because that's where we're going to find all these great and precious promises, but it's also growing in the grace of Jesus, so that we understand something about, God's forgiveness and his patience, right? And his love towards us. God is motivated by love on our behalf. And so Cornelius, he gets that. And so he sends these assistants of his to go and find Peter and bring him back. Now, the other side of this, right, is Peter is on the other end of this communication, and Peter gets a vision, and in that vision, it's about eating that which is clean or unclean. And Peter wakes up confused, not really understanding what this all was about, wondering what the meaning of the vision was. And right around that time, we find that standing at the home where he is staying, those men sent by Cornelius, they are there inquiring about Peter. So we're going to pick this up at verse 17. The idea that Cornelius is a Gentile, so he's on the outside. Peter is this Jew, an apostle of Jesus. He's on the inside, and both of them have received revelation. But that revelation, it prompted them to have a conversation with one another, which I think is fascinating too. Because why did the angel just give him this whole thing right off the bat? Why didn't you just give him this whole revelation and fast forward this conversation with Peter? But what does that say about the meaning of and purpose that God is using us in this whole work of reconciliation? That's why we're called to go out and make disciples. God wants to use us in this process. We are his ambassadors in the world. And this passage here in Acts 10 demonstrates that, because the Spirit could have done it himself. But God says, no, no, no. I want you guys to do this. I want you to have a part of this, because you're going to grow in your love and devotion of me when you're sharing that with other people. And other people now are going to be on the receiving end of this. We get to influence eternity on the behalf of so many. So tell me, that doesn't give you a sense of, purpose and direction. So here in verse 17, why don't we pick it up here? It says, Peter was wondering about the meaning of the vision. And the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was and stopped at the gate. They called out, asking if Simon, who is known as Peter, was staying there. And while Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, Simon, 3 men are looking for you. So get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, for I have sent them. So here again is another prompting of the Spirit in Peter's life. Have you ever had those promptings in your life where, there are many times like, I know I'm biased, but my wife, Cindy, she's a very kind-hearted person. And there'll be many times we'll be doing some things and we'll be engaging some people, and she'll just feel this sense like we ought to do something for that person. And I've learned now over the years just to pay attention, because very often when she gets these kind of promptings, I haven't seen a time yet when it just doesn't seem to be God's timing. And so here, Simon, he also now prompted by the Spirit says, hey, listen, I want you to get up and go downstairs. And I don't want you to hesitate to go with these guys, because I'm the one who sent them. So again, don't you see, like Peter now is recognizing that this life that we're living has to make room for God to be actively engaged in this life. Here's, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but very often if we live this life in a very closed system, in other words, it's only about what I see, what I hear, what I smell, what I touch, right? It's not just, about our senses. There is a whole nother dimension to this life that goes beyond our physical sight or our physical ability to hear, right? There is God that is constantly seeking to speak into our lives here. And here throughout this Acts chapter 10 passage, we see this interaction with God and his agenda coming to meet with us. And so here's Peter has this vision. You would think that it would be simple, right? Like, oh, God gave me the vision. I know exactly what that means. But here's the Apostle Peter still wrestling with what the vision means. He's still thinking about, what is God trying to say to me here? Sometimes wrestling with some of these questions could be the best thing, because as you wrestle with them, you're engaged. It's kind of like trying to fix a puzzle, right? You get so tuned in that you're looking for the right pieces. You're engaged, right? And next thing you know, man, time is gone. Well, when we're thinking about the things of God, it also is going to demonstrate how much you really want to know. Because you could just give up and just say, I'm not interested, and walk away. And what does that say then about the genuineness of your faith? No, God wants to know, do you really want to know? Because I'm happy to give you these answers, but you're going to have to put in some effort. And so Peter here is thinking about the vision, And then the Spirit comes to him again and says, listen, I know you're thinking about this vision, but what I want you to do is I want you to make sure that you go downstairs. Don't hesitate. I want you to go with these people. So Peter goes down. Here at verse 21. Peter went down, said to the men, I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come? Again, the vision didn't give him all the insight. It just gave him enough to know the guys are downstairs. I want you to go with them. But the men reply, says, hey, we have come from Cornelius and the centurion, the Gentile. And they add, he's a righteous and God-fearing man who's respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to have you come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say. So Peter invited the men into the house to be his guests. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. Peter's a Jew. Here you have the Cornelius, this Gentile. And what these men are saying is that God spoke to Cornelius, the Gentile, that God gave him a revelation, that an angel spoke to Cornelius and said, I want you to go and seek out Peter. Do you think that maybe that was going a little beyond maybe some of the presuppositions that Peter may have had, that God speaks to his people? Why is he going to speak to the Gentiles? Why would they? It's understandable that he would receive this vision. After all, he's an apostle of Jesus, right? He walked with Jesus. That makes sense. But this Gentile, why would he get a vision? Why would the Spirit of God go to him? See, everything about this text here in Acts chapter 10 is just pushing out those boundaries, saying, hey, you might have some presuppositions here that need to go by the wayside. So if you think, for instance, that a vision from God is going to answer all the questions, think again, because these visions are leaving these people confused, still wondering, what is this really all about? They only gave them a little piece of the puzzle, but enough for them to take another step. Enough information for them to be obedient, one more action. It's not all. So this revelation from God isn't answering everything. The revelation from God doesn't mean that they are not engaged or have to be engaged. See, like, again, presuppositions. We're thinking like, well, this is the way it should be, but nah, not in this text. It's not happening like that. So it says the next day, Peter starts out with them. This is now in the end of verse 23 of Acts chapter 10. It says the next day, Peter started out with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa went along. So now it's not just Peter. Now some of the other Jews from where Peter is staying, they go along with him. So now you have this whole entourage. It seems like it was a day's journey, right? So it says the following day he arrived in Caesarea. Okay, again, you received this vision that says, I want you to send these men. And then Peter receives a vision. I want you to go with these men. Do you realize that it's a couple of days for them to go from one place to the other? Now, are you going to be inconvenienced by that? You're going to have to make preparation for that. It's not like you're just saying, okay, I'm just going to pick up a phone call and call somebody. No, it's like, saying, no, you're going to have to go on this journey. You're going to have to make an additional effort. And the whole reason why you're making this effort is what? Because you received a vision, that you received some revelation here. Like, so you see how practical things that take place. You have to prepare. You have to pack some stuff with you, right? You have to make the time. Like, all of these things are also a part of listening to what God is saying. So it means that you have to adjust your life. You have to adjust your schedule. Are we willing to do that? When God says for us to do some things, are you willing to kind of go back and revisit the list of priorities that you have in a day? Are you willing to let God, interfere with with your appointment schedule? I mean, there are a lot of times in my role that things happen in people's lives that are unexpected. Someone is taken to a hospital. Someone passes away, right? Someone is battling with some real uh, turn of events that have taken place in their life, and sometimes they just pick up the phone and they're like, "Hey, is a pastor there? I really just need to talk to somebody." And you have to be you have to be sensitive to those things, and yet sometimes it requires some discernment too, right? Because um, I may have already committed to someone who is also in need that day, and now I'm doing my best to juggle all of these kinds of things, just like you do. But the reality is, like, we have to engage, right? We have to wrestle. We have to figure out, how am I going to become obedient more and more to the things of God, to His promptings in my life. And that's why I think it's interesting here. It says the next day, that day they stay, the next day they set out, and the following day they arrive in Caesarea. So this required effort. So it says here in verse 24, Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. So now you have some of the brothers from Joppa coming together with Peter to meet Cornelius, who is also now called his relatives and close friends. So now we have this whole crowd coming together. And notice what happens. As Peter entered the house, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet in reverence. Now, what was that all about? Um, Maybe something of Peter's reputation has preceded him. And by that, I mean, maybe when they asked around, they began to realize who this Peter was, this Simon Peter that he was being asked to, have come. There may have been a level of excitement that, oh my gosh, that in my vision, it told me to ask for this man, but I had no idea who he was. And when he came, he's showing him the honor that maybe as a Roman centurion, he had deferred to those who were over him, right? So out of reverence, he shows this respect and gets down, and falls at Peter's feet. But Peter, who understands the gospel, who understands his position with Jesus, makes him stand up, right? He says, "Get up, stand up. I'm only a man myself," right? So Paul is saying, listen, I'm not that big a deal. There's only one who's really the big deal. That's Jesus. I'm only a servant of Jesus. And it's kind of interesting. I had an opportunity to be a part of the uh, this national movement called Promise Keepers, and I had an opportunity to go to a number of cities and speak to really large groups of men. It was a great opportunity, a lot of excitement. But one of the things that turned me off a little bit about some of that was um, that some of the other speakers, they almost felt like they were celebrities, like superstars. So like when they would go to these stadium events, people would meet them and think about it. So if I had a group, let's say I went to Boise. Well, I'll tell you, I went to uh, a Promise Keeper event in Las Vegas, and the place was just packed with people. The band was phenomenal. The people in that community that were the organizers for this big stadium event, they they were working really hard. They were trying to get as many people there as they could. So when we come and we're the speakers, right? They are doing what Cornelius is doing. They are just showing respect, But some guys that I noticed, they would they would they'd say, "Hey, is there anything we could do for you?" And they would like put in an order, like, well, I don't drink tap water. I want sparkling water. I want and I remember sitting there. I came home and I told my wife, I'm like, I don't know, these guys they think like they're rock stars or something. Not all of them, not all of them, but I just felt like, yeah, that just felt a little icky to me. But here, Peter understands I'm a man just like you, right? So, verse 27, he says, talking with him, Peter went inside, found a large gathering of people. And notice what he says to him. He says, you are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with a Gentile or visit him. Did you just catch that? Listen to it again. Peter, the Jew, with his entourage, is going into the house of Cornelius, the Gentile, with all of his family and friends. And what Peter says is, hey, you guys understand that our law for a Jew to associate with a Gentile, is against our law for a Jew to associate with a Gentile or to visit him. Was that God's law? Or was that the law that was being propagated by some of the religious leaders of that day, thinking that an association with the Gentiles made them unclean? Whoa. Like Jesus was in his teaching, did he not tell his disciples that it's not what goes into a man that makes him unclean, but it's what comes out of his heart that makes him unclean? Washing their hands, associating with a Gentile, talking with them, having a meal with them is not going to make you unclean. But their traditions, their presuppositions was, yeah, Jews don't associate with Gentiles. So this is the first thing that comes out of his mouth when he goes into this house. But he goes on and says, but God has shown me that I should not call any man impure or unclean. How did he get that? Well, not just through the teachings of Jesus, but what was the vision that he just had? Remember the vision while he was asleep of that sheet that came down and all these animals were there and God saying, rise and eat. And he's saying, Lord, I don't need anything unclean. And God says, don't call anything unclean that I have called clean. And then he wakes up and he's wondering, what was that all about? And now he finds himself at Cornelius's home, surrounded by all these Gentiles who his own presupposition said, hey, I'm not supposed to be associating with you or visiting you. And it all comes together. Why am I calling something impure or unclean that God has already cleansed? So he says, so when I was sent for, I came without raising any objection. But he still doesn't know why he's there. He says, may I ask you why you sent for me? And Cornelius tells him, he says, 4 days ago, I was in my house praying at this hour at 3 p.m. Suddenly a man in shining clothes stood before me and said, Cornelius, God has heard your prayer and remembered your gifts to the poor. Send to Joppa for Simon, who is called Peter. He is a guest at the home of Simon the tanner, who lives by the sea. So I sent for you immediately, and it was good of you to come. Now we are all here in the presence of God to listen to everything the Lord has commanded you to tell us. Neither guy really knows what this is all about, other than they were told to be there. Peter has to rise above his presuppositions. Cornelius is going to have to rise above his presuppositions if they're going to be open to listen to everything that the Lord has commanded them. Peter had to listen, otherwise he wouldn't have gone. Cornelius had to listen, otherwise he wouldn't have sent his people and opened up his home. How open are you to the things of God? How open are you to God's revelation? How easy is it for you to put into practice these things that Jesus is telling us? See, this is something that is constant throughout our life. Well, we're running out of time, so we'll have to come back again tomorrow, and we're going to finish up our story. But it's always about going beyond our presuppositions, isn't it? And so I want to thank you for joining me today on this Thursday, August the 31st. And I hope you go out there and seize the day. Start thinking again. What are those priorities that I'm making in my life? How easy is it for me to really listen to what God is saying? And am I beginning to put into practice, even if I don't know the whole thing yet? I'm just putting into practice what I know. Come on, my friends, let's seize the day and never forget that we serve a God who is good all the time. God bless you. Lord willing, we'll spend some more time tomorrow. God bless.